Good evening, everybody. I think we can slowly start, and I would like to welcome you very much. It's really impressive how many people are interested in this topic. We know it's a very pressing topic, and I'm going to give a very, very short welcome from the side of the International Institute for Peace. My name is Stefanie FENKART, and I'm the director here, and we are very happy that we have been able to organize this tonight in cooperation with the Austrian Orient Society and the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies. No worries, I'm not going to talk a lot and a long time because there are going to be much more appreciated and more knowledgeable people discussing about the situation there. But I just would like to give you a very, very short background about why we have this event tonight, and also about the book, because in 2018, in June, we had a conference dealing with the Iranian international system here in these premises, also including people from Tehran, from IPES, but also from the diaspora in the US. And this is now the outcome of this book. I'm not going more into details. I will hand over already to Hannes SWOBODA, and I wish you a very interesting evening. I wish you an interesting discussion, and also hope that you will learn something and enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefanie. A warm welcome to our panel, a warm welcome to all of you. It's not maximum pressure, as Mr. Trump would say, but maximum capacity we have. I'm sorry for that. That not everybody has the best view and the best listening, but I hope that all technical devices will function very well. As already mentioned, it's a book presentation, but of course, a book presentation about Iran these days is much more than a book presentation. We from the Institute are eager to deal with issues of peace and security in an objective way, in a way which is serious, and of course in a way which goes to the root of the matter. That does not prevent that, of course, we have opinions which collide with some of what happenings we had in the past weeks, months, even years. So we are very sad that the United States of America withdrew from JCPOA, because this is a blow to peace and stability in the Middle East. And we are very sorry that Mr. Trump in specific thinks that force, violence, killing is a way to go forward in the Middle East, maybe in other places as well. Of course, we are also very sad that the Iran government and leadership is not thinking about themselves, about how to come to talks, to discussions, to agreements, and is also using force. And we're very sad about the internal developments we see in Iran, especially not reacting positively to some of the demonstrations in Iran itself, in Iraq, and in Lebanon. I think what we miss, and we deplore very much the inefficiency of European Union, but what we miss is a minimum of readiness, of cooperation, of readiness, of sitting on the table and try to find a solution. Maybe the conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and other countries, maybe, of course, in the global level, including the United States, who is withdrawing from the Middle East in a way where at the same time is creating new problems. And the so-called peace plan, which was introduced some days ago, is not really a peace plan. Some, even in Israel, say it is a power to give the Israeli government to go for further annexation, which would bring, again, new conflicts into the whole situation. All these subjects, of course, are open for discussion, and I don't want to take away, again, what our panelists will say, who have been working on the book, and especially thank you, of course, to those who have been initiating and working on the books, because that is a real step forward, and I hope that you, in spite of the price, which is not so low, you will be able to buy the book also here, and you will take the possibility and the initiative. What we want to have this evening is not only a political discussion, what we want to have is also a look at what Iran and its population and its people can produce, from music to art, and maybe also to food afterwards. Because whatever we say about the leadership, the government here, the government there, I think who suffers is the Iranian people. And that, I think, is very deplorable. Everybody who has been in Iran will have great sympathy for the people of Iran. And this is also one element or one message we want to give, that we honor the people of Iran. And one of the honor is by painting, done by somebody who is coming from Iran. Mitra, who is sitting here, will speak very soon, also herself. She had this wonderful gift and creativity, and you see a lot of wonderful pictures here around in this room and in the other rooms. And we are very grateful that Mitra is giving this, not as a gift, but as an exhibition. And maybe you are interested in it and you want to buy it. But the minimum is you should look at it, because it gives you an impression of somebody who comes from Iran, who has great sympathy, of course, with her own people, but still, of course, is critical of some of the developments. And this should be the signal. Never forget, when we speak about regimes, governments, leaderships, the people who suffer, but the people whom we want to send our great sympathies, and that is also true for the people of Iran. With that, I want to close and hand over. Is it immediately to Mitra? So here is now the lady who has painted these wonderful paintings, and I think she deserves applause already for the painting, besides what she will speak.
Vielen Dank für die netten Worte. Ich begrüße alle herzlich. Ich habe die Aufgabe, auf Deutsch und auf Farsi zu sprechen. Alles andere wird auf Englisch gesprochen. Herzliche Grüße und vielen Dank für euren Besuch hier. Ich erkläre ganz kurz, was unser Buch betrifft. Wir haben, also ich sage auch jetzt Darud, Khosh Amadid, jetzt einmal auf Farsi auch. Und das Buch, wir haben eben, wie die Frau Direktorin gesagt hat, eine Konferenz im Juni 2018 gehabt über Iran. Und dieses Buch war schon vom Anfang an inkludiert. Wir haben schon den Plan gehabt, auch ein Buch herauszugeben. Die Expertinnen waren aus Iran und aus anderen Ländern, aus Amerika, aus Europa. Und waren auch Menschen, die vielleicht unterschiedliche Meinungen sind, und deshalb war eine erfolgreiche Konferenz, dass wir auf einem Tisch gesessen sind und über viele Themen gesprochen haben. Und eben das Buch jetzt, das über verschiedene Bereiche spricht. Und das ist eine Anthologie über verschiedene Themen, geopolitische, kulturelle, gesellschaftliche, wirtschaftliche Themen im Iran. Und warum das? Weil Iran, wir wollten eigentlich über spezielle Platz vom Iran in der Welt berichten oder auch in der Konferenz sprechen, seinen Platz in der Region und seine Beziehung zu den Großmächten. Und auch die Bevölkerung, die sich immer wieder geärgert hat mit der Einmischung anderer Länder in seine eigenen Angelegenheiten, und auch der Krieg ums Öl. Und das sind viele Themen, und auch natürlich die Probleme, innere Probleme, was die Menschen wirtschaftlich, aber auch in viele Epochen Unfreiheiten erleben müssen. Iran ist ein widersprüchliches Land. Das hat eine sehr junge Bevölkerung, die nicht von gestrigen ihr Leben führen wollen. Aktive, gebildete Frauen, die nicht die Diskriminierung akzeptieren wollen. Und es ist ein Land mit vielen freundlichen und offenen Menschen und sie sehen sich manchmal gezwungen, ihre Heimat zu verlassen. Derzeit ist die größte Auswanderung in der neuen Geschichte dieses Landes. Dieses Buch ist für Iraner und auch Nicht-Iraner, die über Iran studieren und forschen wollen, weil es unterschiedliche Themen, verschiedene Standpunkte angesprochen und analysiert hat. کوتاه به فارسی میگم. این کتاب بعد از کنفرانسی که ما در سال 2018 در همین انجمن داشتیم با حضور دانشمندان و پژوهشگرانی که از کشورهای متفاوت و ایران بودن، کتاب نتیجه اون کنفرانسه در حقیقت و هدف این کتاب نشون دادن شرایط فعلی ایران، جایگاه فعلی ایران در جهان، پایگاهش در منطقه و ارتباطش با کشورهای بزرگ، ابرقدرت‌ها و مشکلات نفت، مشکلات مردم و ایرانی‌ها در سراسر دنیا تقریباً میشه گفت که به کشورشون علاقه‌مندن و خیلی راجبش فکر میکنن و براشون اهمیت داره که در ایران چی میگذره و به هر حال بحث‌هایی و صحبت‌هایی ما در این کتاب کردیم که احتمالاً برای خیلی از افراد در ایرانی‌هایی که بیرون از ایران هم هستن میتونه جالب باشه. Am Ende möchte ich mit Freude sagen, dass ein weltbekannter Iranistikprofessor ein Österreicher ist. Und zum Glück hat er unsere Einladung zur Konferenz für das Buch und auch für heute Abend angenommen und ist er jetzt hier zwischen uns, wird er es. Ich gebe das Wort an Professor Fragner.
سلام عرض میکنم. It was as we had arranged from the beginning, it was decided that I should address you this time in English, so I try to do my best. The book which we are going to present to the public is, first of all, a book dedicated to the discipline of political science, social sciences, political sciences. And as Mitra just pointed out, that the country the book deals with, the book is about, is at one side a very young country, or a very young population, but a country with a very, very, we shouldn't say old, but ancient civilization. Some claim it to be one of the very oldest civilizations worldwide, And so we are there, we can say that the frame of the book, are done by some cultural considerations which come rather from cultural sciences than from social sciences. And so as you started with this cultural aspect from the very beginning, I tried to pick that up, and I tried to complete the frame, this cultural frame. We are the frame. Anyway, we are the framework, and the content, the picture itself, is actually hardcore. It consists of hardcore political considerations. Anyway, it deserves talking about a country like Iran between the great powers, the country like Iran within the international system, with a particular view to the last, let's say, 50, 60, 70, and even more years, yeah, invites us actually to evaluate this country and the population of this country. The people living there, having lived there and still living there, yeah, during the period of the Cold War, not only as a moment of political studies and political analysis, but also as a moment of a very particular cultural atmosphere, which in many cases at least illustrates, yeah, or may help us to illustrate, to understand our understanding of what had happened in Iran prior to the Islamic Revolution. Because the Islamic Revolution is now, we have an Islamic Republic of altogether roughly about 40 years old. It's past its 40 years already, yeah? So it's not anymore a child, yeah? So but still, this revolution has a prehistory. And it deserves not to forget conditions of this prehistory, because they refer very strongly and very deeply to maybe rather stable and long-time conditions, which we may observe by looking at the social and cultural history of Iran. And this is the great contradiction and the great, not at all harmonic, but the great dialogue, contradictory dialogue, yeah, between the strive for freedom, independence, freedom outside, but also freedom inside. We have to differentiate that. Yeah? Strive for freedom outside is a rather third worldist concept, which is a very important moment in Iranian history. But the strive for freedom inside, yeah, has a very, very strong history in modern, particularly in modern, not in the latest, but in modern history of this country. It dates back, yeah, to events when even fed at that time, nourished by religious intention. Yeah? A great part of the Iranian society had started, yeah, to withstand the selling out of tobacco production to a British subject. Yeah? When suddenly, yeah, by using religious argumentations, a whole nation understood that if we withdraw ourselves, yeah, from nicotine for a while, yeah, we start to become non-smokers, yeah, it might be possible that this aggression, that actually had happened around the year 1870, yeah, this aggression should be blown back. It was the Shah himself who did not dare anymore to show himself publicly with his beloved cigarette, yeah? And so ultimately the whole monopole, this famous monopole at that time, break down. Why do I tell this story? This is a very early incident which tells us that within the Iranian history there is, in the Iranian, in the political culture of the Iranian people, yeah, there is a strong element of withstanding power, of withstanding tyranny. Now, in many cases, this strong intention was maybe in the short run, and almost in the middle scale run, did not turn out to be successful. They were not the winners, but rather the losers. But they never gave up. They never gave up. They didn't give up. They were for a very short time. They were the winners when not based on a military military organization of young officers military officers like in other comparable countries. No, it was a civil intention that actually led to the founding of the constitution at that time of Iran turning out a constitutional country. The strive for constitutional, so-called constitutional revolution, was an all-encompassing, was a movement that encompassed a lot parts of the people. We had a similar, nevertheless, it was altogether 5 years that the parliament could work. But still, this strive for parliamentarism never was forgotten. It found its revitalization at the time in the Mossadegh period. In the Mossadegh period, when again the country were grown by very broad elements of the population, tried to take over their own rights and to lay their on the themes of freedom, democracy, parliamentarism. We know that this also had been destroyed. Yeah? And the result of the whole thing was that ultimately we have now a situation that the whole population, all layers of the population are somewhat soaked by this idea of withstanding tyranny and unjust rulership, wherever they may have been. And the problem is actually that you can't, it's very difficult to divide the country point by point, to find out that these belong to that and those belong to that part. The main point is that still the most promising aspect of Iranian society for the future is just this aspect that civil society, the idea of civil society, is somewhat everywhere. It's in every phase and in every aspect of Iranian population. Nobody can get rid of it, and sometimes those who want to get rid of it will maybe they even find out that it's deep within themselves as well. This is just my contribution, and I finish. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Good evening, dear guests. My name is MARYLIA HUSHCHA. I'm research assistant at the International Institute for Peace. I will be moderating this discussion tonight. You have already heard from two contributing authors to this book, Iran in the International System Between Great Powers and Great Ideas. The book was released last month by Routledge Publishing House, and we are now having this book launch event, which, as Hanna SWOBODA rightly mentioned, is not only about the book itself, but about the country, its culture, its people, and everything that is also happening there today. Before I proceed with the introduction of the contributing authors who are sitting with me at this panel, I would like also to say a couple of words about the book itself. It has 11 chapters. There are 4 major topics that are covered, which are Iran's relations with the United States, Iran's economic development following the revolution of 1979, Iran's relations with Eurasian powers, namely the European Union, China, Russia, and India. And in the final section of the book, we'll look at the Iranian society and influences and changes that it was subject to in the decades following the Iranian Revolution. Generally, there are 2 major events that most of the contributions to this book identify as turning points in Iran's relations with the world. The first one is the Iranian or Islamic Revolution of 1979 that brought down the secular regime of the Shah and saw religious clerics come to power, establishing the Islamic Republic of Iran. The second turning point is more recent. It is the United States' withdrawal from the nuclear deal with Iran that was concluded in 2015, and the US withdrew from it in 2018. Contributing authors draw on various disciplines and theoretical approaches in their respective chapters. Some look at Iran through an historical lens, such as, for example, Shirin Hunter from Georgetown University, who describes Iran-US relations starting from their first contacts in the 19th century all the way up to the US withdrawal from the nuclear agreement. Andreas Bock from the Free University in Berlin employs a social constructivist approach to explain how preconceived perceptions impact foreign policy. He makes an interesting case comparing the image of the Soviet Union as a threat during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the image of the Iranian threat today, and how they have informed the US decision-making. Manas Zahirinejad from the Polish Academy of Sciences analyzes the impact of sanctions on Iran's middle class and whether the growing dissatisfaction with the economic situation in the country can lead to protest and a political change. So you can learn more about the arguments presented by the authors by purchasing the book in the hall. We have a discount price here, so take your chance. I would like to conclude this short introduction with an endorsement that nuclear non-proliferation expert Scott Sagan from Stanford University gave to this book. The risk of conflict between Iran and the United States is real and growing. This timely collection of excellent essays helps explain why. A diverse set of international experts analyzed the complex history of US-Iranian relations, the impact of sanctions on the Iranian economy and domestic politics, and the possible fate of the Iran nuclear deal. Most importantly, the authors present creative ideas about how best to reduce these risks. With this, I would like to hand over to the first speaker and the main editor of the book, HEINZ GÄRTNER, who is also the member of the advisory board here at the International Institute for Peace and a professor at the University of Vienna. Heinz, in your chapter, you mainly focus on regional security and Iran's standing in the Middle East. You also discuss the events that followed after the conclusion of the JCPOA and what followed after the American withdrawal from the agreement. You also speak a lot about how this withdrawal impacted the region, but also the arms control regime globally in general. So how would you explain this decision by President Trump to withdraw from the agreement? And additionally, I would like to ask you about more recent events. How do you assess the recent European countries' decision to trigger the dispute resolution mechanism that's foreseen in the agreement, and that basically means that now, if Iran will not continue to comply with the uranium enrichment limits set in the JCPOA, the Europeans will reinstate their sanctions, something that they really opposed before. Please.
Thank you, Maria. You structured my chapter very well. So first we'll talk about the JCPOA, as you said, then about the events, what happened after the withdrawal, and finally I will come to this regional suggestions in Iran and regional arms control issues. But first of all, I want to thank you, Maria, for editing this book, and she was doing all this administrative and work and communication with all the authors, and without her the book would not be there. But I also want to thank the organizing institutes here, and especially the International Institute for Peace, which provided the infrastructure also and the administration, which the book and the conference and the book eventually was based on. And last but not least, I want to thank all the authors. You see some of them here on the panels, and all the speakers here, which happen to be authors for their excellent contributions in the book. So, as Maria said, my chapter is about the JCPOA, and I have to say that JCPOA, of course, is in the center of the debate, but I would say it's not the cause of the current crisis. I come back to it at the end. JCPOA, somehow I have to admit I have some personal interest to the JCPOA. When its final phase has been negotiated here in Vienna at Coburg, it took about 1 month. Everybody said it should be already done by now every day. And I went there almost every day or second day to get out some bits and pieces of information what they were talking about, and once in a while Secretary of State Kerry would come out, Foreign Minister Zarif would come out and say a few words, and we all, they are the journalists and the scholars there, try to make some sense out of it. But the impression I had at that time was, this is the best negotiated arms control agreement in history. It has 160 pages, and every full stop and every point and every comma has to be agreed upon. So in contrast, what President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying, it's not the worst deal, it's the best deal ever we had, and we'll not get anything better by abandoning the JCPOA. So there were many hopes attached to this JCPOA. Of course, Iran hoped that the sanctions will be lifted and it will just get a boost of its economy. The European Union, for the European Union, it was politically, diplomatically a masterpiece of effective multilateralism. So not going back to the history of the negotiations, but also the European Union hoped to get some better opportunities for investment in Iran, and I myself participated in a huge delegation led by former President Fischer. He was the first president of the European Union visiting Iran, which with an economic delegation. Many memoranda of understanding has been signed. Most of them now have been abandoned. And then President Obama, of course, it was a part of his engagement policy, engagement in contrast to containment. So in May 2018, President Trump withdrew from the agreement, and he reversed all these trends. And that's what was the point when the current crisis really started. And also it was a violation of international law because the JCPOA is based on a resolution of the UN Security Council 2231. And for that it has the character of international law. After the withdrawal, of course, we know this all, this maximum pressure campaign started. Iran has been imposed with more and severe sanctions. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard have been set on the list of terror, and the Foreign Minister Zarif was imposed, on Foreign Minister Zarif have been imposed sanctions as well, and last year he couldn't go to the Security Council meeting at the United Nations either. What was following the 12 points by Secretary of State Pompeo, requesting Iran to come back to the negotiating table, but it was not Iran who left the table, but it was the US who left the table. And these 12 conditions are a document of surrender and capitulation, like what the Austrians did to Serbia in 1914. What was predictable, what followed, and that's what is basically a prelude of pre-war situations, is all these incidents we have all read in the papers. So we have this seizure of tanks and tankers and all these rocket launches. In many ways, the attribution where they come from cannot be done, but the blame game was going on. And of course, the peak of this incident was the assassination of this General Soleimani, Qasem Soleimani. And he was an official person in Iran, and his assassination can be equal to the assassination of the Secretary of Defense in the United States, at least from the point of view from Iran. One intention to do this by Trump, there are many reasons, we can discuss this, but one intention was to destroy any possibility for resetting the American-Iranian relations as it was intended by President Obama. We can expect that more incidents will follow, so we see it already. And this increases the risk of military confrontations. We do have two red lines which might be crossed, and then we would have basically an all-out war, or at least a war of attrition. So there's one red line for the US and one red line for Iran. The red line for the US is if there will be American casualty by one of the incidents, and the perpetrator might be, it might be attributed to Iran. Then President Trump has to do something in order to save face at home, so American casualties cannot be accepted there. So that would be a high possibility for a military intervention. The red line for Iran is if Iranian territory will be affected by a military strike, then Iran has to do something and also has to save face at home. The pretext for this, and now I come back to my main topic, the pretext is the nuclear issue. So Iran announced also, which was still compatible with the JCPOA in Article 33, Iran said it would step by step withdraw from the JCPOA as well, what Iran did in a very limited level. But after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, Iran said it would not be bound by the limitations of the JCPOA anymore. So I have to say, without immediately heading towards, how many minutes? Without heading towards a nuclear weapon. The Europeans, they were afraid of American secondary sanctions. So they could not meet the promises made in the JCPOA that sanctions would be lifted. And Iranian companies have much better business with the US than with Iran, about 30 times more. So they abandoned the business with Iran for the benefit of the business with the United States. They tried to set up this INSTEX mechanism where you can bypass American sanctions, but it was not really used yet. It was supposed to create a possibility for Europeans to buy Iranian oil. They didn't do it so far. So the INSTEX was working. The Iranians were not satisfied. They're withdrawing from the JCPOA. Now Trump and the scenario, and Netanyahu will cry foul and say the Iranians now are building the bomb. And this provides the ground for military intervention. If President Trump can make the case at home that the Iranians are building ICBM, which nuclear-tipped ICBM, which can hit the US, the Americans might well accept military intervention in Iran. And also Scott Sagan, I'm finishing soon, but also Scott Sagan did a study that the Americans, in that case, if you can make a case like Pearl Harbor, the Americans might well accept up to, I hesitate to say this, up to 2 million American dead casualties. So if push comes to shove before the elections, Trump has very bad opinion polls. He might consider military intervention, and the Europeans now provided some possibility because Europeans triggered this dispute settlement mechanism of the JCPOA, which after 2 months might end up in the Security Council, and the Security Council will not vote on sanctions, but the sanctions will automatically automatically snap in, and probably Iran will leave the NPT as well, and this might be a pretext for military intervention. So it was a very risky game by the Europeans to do so. So to the real cause, it's not that the nuclear issue. I just say it's about the hegemonic competition in the region. So I will maybe come back to this later because Marylia is pressing me to stop now. So thank you.
Thank you very much for being that on time. I will now turn to MAHDI GHODSI, and we will need a PowerPoint presentation. MAHDI is an economist at the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies, and for the book he also wrote a chapter on Iran's economy and Iran's economic development after the revolution. In his chapter, he addresses many issues such as openness of the economy, role of the sanctions in the post-revolutionary Iran, especially in the years preceding the conclusion of the JCPOA. And you are also very critical about the domestic policies. You're arguing that it's not only about the international sanctions, but also how it was handled at home by the authorities. So maybe an additional question to your presentation, if you can address it at the end, would be how do you explain or how do you see what's happening now in the country with the protests that already led to some casualties and that were triggered actually by the doubling of the fuel prices?
Thank you for the introduction. Well, actually, before being an economist, I am an Iranian. And as an Iranian, I'm wearing black here because we are mourning the death of many people that have been shot dead by mistake or without any mistake. We are sorry for their death. We are sorry for the past 2 months. Well, actually, I'm living in Vienna for 5 years, and it's a very relaxed country. Even because it's very calm, you get depressed. But in Iran, we are always being shocked. So being shocked, but I mean, it's mostly, as Maria said also, it's the mismanagement of the political system in Iran for the past 40 years. I have some graphs for you. I will show in economic terms what they mean exactly. And I will also get back to this, after the sanctions, I will show you some more data to show how this mismanagement, well, if I'm an Iranian, I should ask my own system, political elites, the government, I should ask, come on, for 40 years, why didn't you make peace with the world? So I see it's the main responsibility of the government that should make peace with the world, with the United States. You cannot blame the shooting of an airplane on US, yeah? But we have it for 40 years. So I will show it on the graphs, the economic side of it. Let me have some water. So Iran is a very large country. In 2019, it's estimated that it has 83 million population. So it's the 19th largest country in the world in the size of population. And in the size of its economy, it's 24th. And Iran is a very resourceful country. Oil and gas combined, it's the top in the world. And it's almost a closed economy. It doesn't, for its trade, it's trading about 40% of its total income, total GDP, but it doesn't have any FDI actually. Its structure, it's about mostly services, a little agriculture, so it's not self-sufficient in many things, but it's a very diversified country. It's diversified in ethnicities, it's diversified in industries. If you combine EU countries together, Iran is the 10th producer of automobiles in the world, but it cannot export because it's not competitive enough. So Iran has a large human capital, and I will explain to you why it has large human capital. Because it's about Iran's role in the world economy, I can show you some graphs from 1960s. Before the Islamic Revolution, you see a big jump here that you see Iran was selling lots of oil to the world. And actually, in one chapter of the book, you could read that actually that was the problem, that United States didn't like Shah anymore, yeah? So because Iran was getting very rich, its GDP was increasing a lot. Shah wanted to invest a lot. And you see in the graph that after that time, after the Islamic Revolution happened in 1979, everything became a bit worse. So mainly Iran couldn't sell its oil. Yeah, it's a resourceful country. But at the time of, in the period of 1980s, when there was 8-year Iran-Iraq war, the spiritual leader of Iran asked people to reproduce. By reproduce, I mean reproduce human being, regenerate, yeah? So you see, Iran's size in population is growing, but its economy is not growing. So it's easy for a theocratical autocracy to ask its own people to reproduce, but they cannot ask them to regenerate in economic terms because they don't have the technology, they don't have capital. So the worst story is about real income per capita. So real income, by real income, I mean how many fruits you can buy per person, yeah, in one country. And you see this big junk here, it's very big. It's before the revolution. Of course, Iran was selling lots of oil. And after that, for most of countries, like if you check Austria, it was around here at that time, and it was growing. So you see, for Iran, it doesn't grow at all. At the time of war, it was a great slowdown. And then, even recently, after 2018, well, actually for 2018 and 2019, I'm using the estimations by the IMF. So you see that in 2019, Iran has 9.5% recession. And this 9.5% recession happened only at the time of war. Nowhere else in the history of Iran. I mean, the huge recession is around here. And you see, these gray lines, these are inflation. And what does it tell us? It's about 20 to 40% every year. So only in few years, only maybe 4 or 5 years, the inflation was less than 10%. In rest of them, it was between 20 and 40%. What does it mean? It means that if you go to a shop this year and buy one apple, in the next year with the same money, you get 20% less apple. And Iran is a centralized economy. So everything that is done in the economy, most of it is done by government, by the semi-public companies. And the semi-public companies are mostly affiliated to the top of the system of power, circle of power in Iran. So these are controlling the country, and they cannot grow the economy that much in the past 40 years. So if it is not the mismanagement, what is it? So whenever the government wants to set a new budget for the next Persian calendar year, for its own revenue and its own costs, it increases the minimum wage, it increases the salaries of workers by just 20%, 25%, not 40%. So you see, when your income is not increasing as much as your inflation is increasing, you're getting poorer and poorer. So middle income class became poor, and poor became poorer. So in the recent events, since 2 years ago, poor went on the streets. They didn't have bread to buy. 2 months ago, again they went on the streets. Why? Because government cannot sell its oil. Government does not have revenue anymore. Well, again, the government blame it on the US sanctions. Of course, there are US sanctions, but do something to solve it, yeah? So because it cannot sell its oil, it cannot boost its revenue, its budget. I told you, it's a centralized economy. When it cannot boost its economy, when it cannot boost its own budget, it should earn it from some other sources, yeah? It should change the subsidy on petroleum or benzene to a tax on petroleum. So people of Iran understand it perfectly. They don't need to be economists to see it. They understand it on the second day that the petroleum price is higher, because they take a taxi and they see that it's more expensive. Everything became more expensive. So mismanagement is this, yeah? You implement a policy that either you don't know the impact, or you know the impact and you're prepared to suppress it on all the streets of Iran. Well, actually, there's no statistics. There's no official statistics of how many people got shot on the streets, yeah? But this is how it is done. You need to make fear on the streets so that people do not go on the streets again. Yeah? So if it was one person being shot dead or 1,500, it doesn't matter. So this mismanagement did not let us have the higher GDP per capita income, and this is the amount of oil that is sold per day, so it is OPEC share. You see, this in 2018, 2019, a similar thing happened only at the time of war. So if it is at the time, if it is war, you need to make peace with your enemy. So if it is war, just do it quickly as you can. Give concessions as much as you want, as much as they want, and get some more concessions as much as they give. And make peace, so that this doesn't happen. Your country doesn't go bankrupt. And this is, again, I wanted to show you about the inflation. This is at the time of construction. Mr. Rafsanjani was president at that time, and Iran's economy was overheating, so the inflation was about 40%. We didn't have a similar thing before. At the time of Ahmadinejad, again, we had similar event. We had very high inflation rate, but again, we have at the time of Mr. Rouhani. I thought he had a technocratic government. He could control everything, but it seems that I was wrong. So the inflation is coming from the Center of Statistics of Iran. So it's not reproduced, it's not a fake data. But as far as I hear from my mother, as far as I hear from other people in Iran, it's even much higher than 50%, the inflation rate. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is ERZSÉBET N.RÓZSA from Institute for World Economics in Hungary, and she's also a lecturer and researcher at the National University of Public Service. ERZSÉBET, you contributed a chapter on two Asian powers, namely Russia and India, and you are talking about their foreign policy towards Iran and also Iran's perceptions of how they view these two countries. So maybe one more interesting remark. In 2018, Ayatollah Khamenei announced that Iran should prefer East to West in its foreign relations. But this policy of the turn to the East was already started some years ago, even earlier. So how do you say, what was it? How does it look like today?
Thank you very much, Malia, and I would like to thank the organizers. And I have to admit that I am a latecomer into the project. I was not here for a conference, but I was invited later. So it was really a challenge to try to speak about two Asian countries, leaving the third one out. And I struggled with it, but somehow I came up with a kind of an introductory part where it is not only the bilateral relations that we have to take into account, but also the context, and namely the Asian context. And the idea was given to me by a speech given in 2003, I think in Tehran, by the foreign minister at the time, who considered Iran as one of the four big Asian powers who would define the developments in Asia, and namely these are the powers that we are speaking about. It is obviously Russia, obviously China, India, and Iran. So these would be, in their perception, the countries that would make Asia great again, or that would bring up Asia. Anyhow, Iran considers itself as part of the Asian development and the regional power in Western Asia. This is one thing. However, already at the time, or I should say rather from the beginning of the late 90s, Iran has phrased its looking to the East policy and have started to deal with being rejected by other parts of the world, increasingly try to turn towards the East, and of course the realization that China and India depend on Iranian hydrocarbons and other Iranian like crude oil and anything. They thought that this could be the basis of a future cooperation. I also have to say that Iran perceives itself as a regional power, but also as a global power. And the global dimension, of course, comes in the field of ideology, in the field of Islam, Shiite Islam, but also the whole of Islam, if we refer back to the late Ayatollah Khomeini. However, when I would like to come to these bilateral relations now, because the time is running short, and when I tried to look at Iran-Russia and Iran-India, this had to be analyzed in the context of an emerging Asian identity. Whether we hear about it here in Europe or not, there is something happening in Asia, and there is an Asian resurgence as well. We can sincerely say that Iran does have a relevance for Asia. However, this relevance is not unlimited, and this relevance depends very much on the bilateral relations of either Russia or China or India to the United States. So the Iranians are very much aware of this vulnerability. However, they try to play the game as long as they can, and frankly speaking, President Trump helps them a lot, time and again, when he leaves the Chinese aside or when he leaves the Russians there and so on. I also have to say that in the context of Russia and in the context of India, there are overlapping neighborhoods. With Russia and Iran, the biggest neighborhood, of course, is the Caspian, Central Asia. With India, it is a little bit more, including the Indian Ocean as well. And this brought me to the understanding that there are still issues in Asia over which President Trump has no direct influence. He may have an impact on different cooperation formats. He may have an impact on different policies, but he cannot change the fact that India can reach Central Asia through the Iranian port to be built, Chabahar, much closer on a much shorter way than even if the Pakistanis were opening up their space to Indian involvement. So I think that there are realities on the ground in Asia which belong to the sphere of influence, which is an interplay between the big powers, the regional powers, and of course the regional, much smaller states. The second slide that I would like to present you is more a little bit of a how should I say, a list of items that should be mentioned with regard in the relationship of the two countries, of the two bilateral relations. With Russia and Iran, the relationship is historically a relationship of tensions and cooperation, mutual distrust. I think we could even say time and again it is coming up. It is not a strategic alliance. Maybe it can be of a momentary alliance over one issue or another issue, but it is much more a marriage of convenience. And it always has to be analyzed in the context of the shifting balance of power globally and also regionally. At the heart of this issue, when we come down to the direct details, it is usually technology, energy, especially the nuclear energy technology, the nuclear power plant sold by the Russians to Iran, and already the second phase has been started in Bushehr and arms trade. We also have to remark here that in the Russia-Iran trade relations, money is going from Iran to Russia, or should be going from Iran to Russia. On the Indian side, it is vice versa. Money should be going from India to Iran. And there are three cases which I am discussing in the paper, where there are distinct cooperations or just existences, tensions between Iran and Russia. It is Syria, the Caspian Sea, and the nuclear file. And just one sentence on Syria. When my colleagues refer to, well, you know, the Iranians are there in Syria, I said, yes, they are, but their room of maneuver is not unlimited. Russia is there, what do you think? And Turkey is there, and others are there. But Russia is there, so it is not that Iran does whatever it wants to. It has chances, it has cooperations and so on, but it has to compare everything with Russia and the others who are there. With regard to India and Iran, Iran definitely plays a very important role in Delhi's desire to become a third power, a great power status, and especially the permanent membership in the UN Security Council. 2 weeks ago in Delhi, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, was saying it openly that we are supporting India's membership, permanent membership in the Security Council with other 2 countries. Definitely there is the nuclear issue, India's nuclear arsenal, which is in the equation. India's strategic autonomy, which India is very proud of, but now it is very much tested under the American secondary sanctions. And of course the Indian counter-maneuver, or at least the Indian try at counter-maneuvering the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. And of course there are the threat perceptions from the joint neighborhood of terrorist organizations who operate in the name of Islam, sometimes in the territory of Pakistan as well, and the Muslim minorities in India, which give way to cooperation, but also makes the 2 countries wary of each other and very cautious with each other. And then the direct issues, the concrete issues that I am discussing in the paper is the energy resources. As said, India would be very much dependent on Iranian supplies. The big buzzword of these past 2 years, connectivity, and especially for India, this means the Chabahar port. Just 1 sentence on the Chabahar, how important it is not only for Iran, not only for India, not only for anyone else, but also for the United States, is proven by the fact that the Chabahar port projects are exempted by President Trump from sanctions. Have you heard about that? Unheard of. Why? Because the United States also needs a much better access to Afghanistan especially, but also to other parts of Central Asia. In spite of this, Indian companies have practically stopped cooperating over Chabahar for the time being. Not only, they are fully aware that President Trump gave the exemption to the projects, but their banks are not aware of that. So the Indian companies has become very cautious not to antagonize and not to invite American sanctions on themselves. So with this, I would like to finish it. And I hope that you will read the book, and I would like to thank you again for being involved in such a very nice project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ERZSÉBET. You managed to cover 2 countries in the same time as the other speakers covered just 1, or will cover 1, hopefully. I would like to introduce you MHER SAHAKYAN, who is a researcher and university lecturer and also director at China-Eurasia Council for Political and Strategic Research in Armenia. And being the director of China-Eurasia Council, MHER obviously wrote about China and China's relations with Iran. He especially focused on the negotiations of the JCPOA and the process that took place within the UN Security Council prior to the conclusion of the agreement. And he also talks a lot about China's Belt and Road Initiative and the role that Iran plays in it. Here, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for introducing my chapter. Before my speech, I want to thank International Institute for Peace for inviting me and for their support. And special thanks go to Professor HEINZ GÄRTNER and editorial board for their leadership on this work. And today I will speak about Sino-Iranian uneasy cooperation after the signing of the GSPA in the era of the Belt and Road Initiative. In a broader sense, China is interested in solving the Iranian nuclear issue in a peaceful way and by preserving the stability of Iran for 5 main reasons. The first one, China is interested in Iran's energy sources. The second one, China is interested in Iran's stability because it is located in the center of important energy communications and transportation routes. The third one, China is interested in a strong and safe Iran as it reduces US influence in the Middle East. The fourth, Iran is an important market for Chinese products. And the next one, China sees Iran as an important player in the Middle East for its Belt and Road initiative. In the United Nations Security Council, China tried to direct the increasing tensions on the Iranian nuclear program towards negotiations and to exclude sanctions on Iranian oil and gas production. As we know, after the long negotiations, the permanent 5+1 and Iran finally agreed on GSPA on July 14, 2015. On January 23, 2016, in Tehran, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. Previously, Chinese President had avoided traveling to Iran, likely due to the desire to avoid the perception of overly close relations with Tehran. Xi's visit reversed this trend. The visit also resulted in the establishment of China-Iran Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. Iran and China also signed a bilateral memorandum of understanding on joint promotion of the Belt and Road initiative. Overall, the two states have set the ambitious goal of increasing bilateral trade tenfold to USD 600 billion. China and Iran have reached a USD 10 billion deal to construct 2 nuclear plants in Iran and will cooperate in the design and modernization of Iran's heavy water reactor at Arak. The customs administration of the two countries reached an agreement on custom information sharing as part of a joint plan of action in customs cooperation. China offered Iran to become a member of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. In 2017, the bilateral trade volume exceeded 47 billion USD with a year-on-year growth of 90%. The North Azadegan and Yadevaran oil fields jointly developed by China and Iran with contract value of more than 5 billion USD. As part of Belt and Road initiative, China's CITIS group in September 2017 announced that they would extend a USD 10 billion credit line for Iran to build everything from railways to hospitals. The Cherry MVM, with its market volume of nearly 300,000 vehicles per year, has become the first biggest automobile company in Iran after Saab and Khodro. China is also interested in making Iran one of the leading players in its Belt and Road initiative, main direction, which is called Silk Road Economic Belt. On January 2017, a train having left the Ivu city in East China's Zhejiang province and moved from Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan arrived in Iran, having traveled a distance more than 10,000 kilometers. But the Sino-Iranian economic cooperation was threatened when the US withdrew from the GSPA. And when Washington reimposed the unilateral sanctions on Iran that had been lifted or waived under the GSPA. For these reasons, it is very hard for Chinese companies to make new investments and start new businesses in Iran. The sanctions imposed by the US on Iranian financial and economic sectors actually excluded Iran from international economic and financial systems. It is very hard for Iranian, Chinese, and other foreign companies which work in Iran to get foreign currency for international bank transfers there. For this reason, many foreign companies, Chinese companies, are leaving Iran. Chinese leading telecommunications equipment and consumer electronic manufacturer, Huawei, is also appeared under the heavy sanctions of the US. As a result, its CFO, Meng Wanzhou, was arrested in Canada as Washington accused her of helping Huawei dodge US sanctions on Iran. In sum, although there was some development in Sino-Iranian cooperation in the Belt and Road Initiative framework during the last years, it will now be very hard to imagine new Chinese investments in Iran. Furthermore, Iran will remain one of the main transit directions of Silk Road Economic Belt, China, Central Asia, Western Asia Economic Corridor, but because of US sanctions, the cooperation in other fields will stay limited. In conclusion, Chinese policy on Iran's nuclear issue is to maintain and implement a negotiated GSPOA for political and diplomatic efforts. Thus, even after May 8, 2018, when the US announced its withdrawal from the GSPOA, Chinese authorities announced that China would maintain communication with all parties and continue to protect and execute the agreement fully. In this new reality, Iran will try to find ways to develop economic cooperation with China in the framework of Belt and Road Initiative, but given the US sanctions, the process will be very hard and restricted. Now we can also witness Rouhani's Ahmadinejad moment, as during the presidency of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, Rouhani frequently criticized Ahmadinejad's look to the East policy, mentioning that Iran must cooperate mostly with the West to solve the Iranian nuclear problem. But recently we see that after the US reimposed sanctions on Iran, Rouhani and his team have shown great disappointment with the West, and now they are trying to lead Iran to the Sino-Russian camp by creating a strategic partnership with Beijing and Moscow. Of course, efforts towards implementation of the instrument in support of trade exchanges, which are led by France, Germany, and the UK, are a positive sign for the GSPOA, but cannot actually be helpful to Iran, as the mechanism is expected to cover non-sanctionable essential goods such as humanitarian, medical, and farm products. It is not expected to address oil-related transactions, which are of vital importance for Iran. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all discussants for all your contributions. At this point, we're already very advanced in time. I would like also to turn to the audience, and I'm sure you have lots of questions. We will have 2 microphones. I would like to ask you to raise your hand, introduce yourself, and pose a question, if possible, to just one speaker on the panel.
Anyone from the panel, if they could also touch on the topic of military. We haven't heard anything about that.
Military where?
The military
in Iran.
Sure.
Yeah, we collect separate a couple of questions. There is one over there.
Sorry, it will be. Okay, it will be the question from the former MP from Ukraine, and we want to say that Iran faces growing criticism at home, abroad, over downing of Ukrainian plane. And we think that it was a kind of provocation to stimulate the creation of global coalition against Iran. And we are from Ukraine. It is MP. His name is Sergei Melnichuk. Yeah, and he asked me to ask this question, if it's a kind of provocation, and what will be the European Union reaction towards this, the crash of Ukrainian airplane. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yes, please, over there.
Hello, my name is Victor Florian-Sabo. I'm currently writing my dissertation about the Iranian insurance industry, and I'm currently a research fellow of Tehran Shahid Beheshti University, and I have a question to Mr. MAHDI GHODSI. You mentioned the extraordinary role of the state in the Iranian economy. And my question is, there has been a large privatization campaign in the end of the 2000 years, 2008, I think. And my question to you is, did it reach the desired effect, respectively? Did it have some influence on the significant influence on the role of the state in the Iranian economy? Thank you.
Thank you. And there was one more question over here.
Thank you. My name is Kamal. I'm a legal researcher. My question is concerning Iranian-Israeli relations. As it is known, Iran is bringing big sacrifices by supporting the Palestinians, the Palestinian cause, while the most important Arab countries support Israel and United States against Iran. So what is the background of the hostility between Iran and Israel? Is it historic, religious, or maybe populism? What's the reason? It is quite ununderstandable that while the Arabs, the most Arab countries support Israel against Iran, and Iran is supporting the Palestinians, while Palestinians are Sunni Muslims, and Iran is known to be a Shiite country majority. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Maybe in the second round, all right. So the first question was about the military in Iran. I suggest maybe HEINZ GÄRTNER, you could tackle it. And also, you mentioned also during your introductory remarks that you would like also to talk about hegemony in the region. So I guess this is the point where you connect.
Thank you. I'll combine these questions. I try really to be as brief as possible. But that was a question of the military. Iranian military in conventional sense is very weak. So its military expenditures altogether are about $16 billion. So it is about 2% of what the United States is spending on defense. And compared to that, Saudi Arabia is spending around 80 billion on defense. So Iranians cannot afford a real traditional conventional war in the region. So that's why Iran is building a second line of defense. So that's why what the Americans accuse always the Iranians, they support some militias, they support Hezbollah, but that was from the Iranian point of view, that's a deterrence. Deterrence against the Saudis, deterrence against the Islamic State, deterrence against the Americans. So you can blame the Iranians about their behavior, but that's what they have to do in order to keep at least the territory safe of military attacks on the territory, and especially from the Islamic State. But it's not so much only about military spending. So there have been several rankings out about Iran, and one I want just to mention before this real inflation kicked in Iran. Iran, in terms of purchasing power parity, that means the internal purchasing power, Iran is still in the 12th the strongest country in the world, so not external, internal. So the purchasing power was really strong, but it weakened over time because of this high inflation inflation rate. But there's another ranking, and the ranking is about geopolitics, and you can look it up yourself. It's called Global Firepower, about geopolitical potential of countries in the world. And so they look at about 30, 40 criteria. So the most important of them are the resources. Iran, of course, has resources. Their borders, the education, working infrastructure, disciplined military, coastlines, relations, coastline mountains. So here Iran is ranking 14th in the world. So it's not about, we call it in political science, agent and structure. It's not only about behavior, it's about structure as well. So Iran is a hegemonic power in the region if it can use all its potential. And that's why the Americans want to limit Iranian influence. The Saudis want to limit Iranian influence, and the Israelis want to limit it. So they are all afraid of Iranian hegemonic influence, whatever Iran does. So you can limit Iranian influence with heavy sanctions, economic sanctions, but you can limit that with military strikes. So you can bomb Iran back for about 2-3 decades, so before it starts to develop. So it's not about the GCPOA, it's not about the nuclear issue, it's about hegemony. Unfortunately, and I'm finishing, unfortunately, I have to say, the situation as it is, it provides a lot of pretext for military intervention. And I have to say the Iranians themselves, they shouldn't have stepped out of the GCPOA, because as long as they stayed in the GCPOA, Iran was credible to say, we don't want to develop a nuclear weapon. Now they're stepping out and still saying we don't have a nuclear weapon, but they're threatening, they might be building one, they want to threaten the Europeans. So Iranians are not so credible anymore and provides the hawks in America and Israel for military intervention. So, and it will not be a conventional war, it might be a bombing from the air, and Iran will to have a fight, an asymmetric war using all these militias it might have, and also cyber, that might be a cyber war going on both sides, not only on the Iranian side. So that's what I called before a war of attrition, which is as dangerous as an open conventional war.
Thank you. The next question was about Ukraine. MHER, if you want to.
I will try to answer. Recently, we testimonied the tragedy, a disaster which was happened with airplane. Many Iranians and other nationalities died. For this reason, international community must do its best to avoid war in Iran, because it is not a problem only of Iran. As we know, there are many nuclear plants and many regional and non-regional countries and people can lose. So we must do our best, international society must do its best to avoid war in Iran. Thank you.
Thank you. MAHDI, there was a specific question to you about privatization in the 2000s and its effect.
Can I also comment on others?
Sure. Shortly, please.
So, well, about military in Iran, I actually agree with what Heinz said, and since 40 years ago, Iran did not purchase any fighter jet. So Iran cannot purchase any conventional weapons because it's under sanction. And it was planned to be out of sanctions in 1 or 2 years by the GCPOA, so Russia was planning to sell Iran some military stuffs. But it seems that it's not going to happen. So Iran's military in the region is very strong. It's mainly because of network of proxies, and General Soleimani was the head of designing this network. So the network was huge. So whatever Iran wanted to do in the past few years or decade, Iran managed to do it with its proxies. Yeah. So of course, there is no. It's based on allegations. Of course, I mean, I'm a scholar. I'm just saying about the facts. So I'm saying it's all allegations. But you know how the power works. So if there is any war between the United States and Iran, it will be a very bad war because it will take years and years, maybe a decade. So it will not be the same as Iraq that will happen in 1 week. So I agree that the international community should avoid such a war with Iran, but the international community should push Iran to give the black box of airplane to Ukraine. So we should know, we should understand what exactly happened. We still don't know. They told lies for 3 days. So what can I say? Maybe they are still lying, I don't know. About privatization in Iran, well, it seems that there was a goodwill for privatization, and it was mandated by the supreme leader of Iran to privatize in Iran. It was exactly at the time of Mr. Ahmadinejad, and he was supported by the hardliners in Iran. By hardliners, I mean those who are selected to the center of power, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards. Yeah. So whatever happened in that year, selling and privatizing public entities, they again sold it to whom? There are some facts, there are some newspapers from that time that they were selling these things. Some parts of it, they didn't manage to sell a lot. They sold the shares to Revolutionary Guards. For instance, the telecommunication, for instance, the steel industry. So it went from one pocket to another. So from complete control of government to semi-public, to the deepest state. There's a similar event happening just right now, and it's to boost Iran's government budget, and it is mandated it's envisaged in the next year government budget to sell government's assets, and it's already started. So how do they want to sell it? They don't sell it in the official exchange market in Tehran. They don't sell it there, because if they do that, it will become transparent enough so that it will be aimed by the sanctions of USA. So in order to avoid that, they will sell everything in the second official market. And what is that second official market? I don't know. So to whom they sell it, I don't know. So it's, again, could be from one pocket to another. About Iran-Israel relations and the background, well, if you read in one of the chapters of the book, you would see from the pre-revolutionary history of Iran relation with Israel that went a bit bad. But after that, the revolution is completely ideological. So from day one, the Islamic Republic of Iran should support Islamic identities in the world. And one of them is supporting the Palestinian, and etc., etc. So if we don't see any change from that time, because, as I said earlier, it's ideological theocracy. So it shouldn't change its own ideology. If it changes, it means that it's collapsed. The ideology collapsed. So I think that's the issue behind. And one thing that I forgot to discuss it in my own presentation was about human capital. Iran's human capital was going up. The reason was, I talked to you about demographic change at the time of Iran-Iraq war. The population increased a lot. So I think it was increased by 40–50% in 10 years. And then exactly after those years, they were planning 5-year plans, similar to what Soviet Union was doing. So they envisaged in the 5-year plans to have growth in order to have growing economy so that they can employ in the future those people who were born in 1980s. I'm one of them. But it was going on and the growth did not reach its level. So when they got 18 years old, 20 years old, 25 years old, instead of going and finding a job, they went to universities. So human capital in Iran increased a lot. But after that, which was 5 years ago, they got graduated from universities, they couldn't find jobs. They became jobless. So what should they do? They either should go out of the country or go on the streets.
Yes, Heinz, short intervention.
Let me just add some brief thing about this tragic accident with the Ukrainian plane. There was a report 2 days ago by the New York Times, which managed to hour by hour to find in detail what happened. I can just briefly summarize this report. So the military, because of the assassination of the General Soleimani, was on high alert. Then a false alarm about cruise missiles was coming in. The commander could not reach the authority center because it broke down. So the commander itself decided to shoot down this flying object. So when you said they were lying, it was the military which was lying for 4 days. They wanted to cover that up because they were afraid. So they were afraid. And it took 4 days before Rouhani was informed. And Rouhani said, if you don't get clean...
It was Friday.
If you don't get clean, I will resign. So that was basically... And then Khamenei decided that you have to admit what happened. And there's another caveat to this. The spokesman of the foreign ministry who defended all this got a nervous breakdown after they got the information that the Iranians themselves was that. So the Iranian political system is very complicated. There are many factions in the Iranian political systems, so many do not know what the other ones are doing. So this is one example that it's not easy to say what they are doing, so the regime or something. So the regime is not the regime are many factions. So.
Thank you. Erzsébet, would you like to add on any of the points?
Yes, thank you. I think when we are discussing Iran and especially Iran in the last 40 years, we always have to keep one thing in mind. There is just one overarching goal, the maintenance of this specific model. You may call it regime, you may call it model, you may call it the velayat-e-faqih, but this is the only issue. And everything is looked through the prism of this overarching aim. And exactly here, as Heinz said, when President Rouhani was informed of what happened and he threatened to step down, it couldn't be done. Why? Because the country is going to elections. Majlis elections are here in a few days, a few weeks. By the way, I am waiting for the Arba'in of Soleimani, which will coincide with the anniversary of the revolution, by the way. So it was not a very good timing, should I say. No one told it to President Trump. And then in a few weeks, a few days' time, again, the Majlis election. This specific model, since it is based on Shiite Islam, it means that legitimacy is gained by the mass support. Now imagine the Arba'in, the 40th day of the death of Soleimani, which will be a specific mourning day, mourning for Soleimani. How many people will go out in the street in Iran? Millions. Even those who are not necessarily friends of the model, should I say. And this will give, again, a point of reference to the Iranian leaders. Now you see, if before each and every election, be it a presidential or a majlis, Ayatollah Khamenei comes out in the open and you can see all the billboard signs around Iran. Everyone should go and use your democratic right to vote. Use your vote and vote. And whatever we may think of Iran or whatever the press in different countries writes, in the last elections, 42 million Iranians went to vote. 42 million, that's more than half of the population, or about the half of the population. Now, so I think that this gives a big boost to the legitimacy of the present order. The other thing is the Islamic principle. The Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran says that the main lawgiver in the Republic is God himself. You cannot be in opposition with God. That's the problem. We may laugh at it, but it is not, I don't think it is ridiculous at all. It's very serious. Even an atheist would refrain from saying that I am in opposition to God. He would lose popularity straight at once of many people. And just one more thing. I think that the Iranian specific model as it is operating in a way reminds me of our former socialist system. That is a dual system. There is the ideological, here it's Shiite Islam, and there is the formal, where you have the separated branches of power. You have the Majlis, you have the president who is the executive power, you have the judiciary. Is it operating? It is operating, and time and again the Iranians surprise us. I was shocked to see, not shocked, positively shocked, surprised to see how intensive a campaign can be before a presidential election. Free, relatively free, everyone can say in that very short period running up to the elections, everyone can give his opinion. And it's you would be surprised. And then just coming back to one more issue, the Iran-Israel. It's a very complicated relationship. On one level, it is rhetorics. Ever since Ayatollah Khomeini, this Zionist regime, I'm sorry, I'm quoting, and then Ahmadi was quoting again, should be, that is occupying Jerusalem. Jerusalem is also a holy city for the Muslims. We should never forget that. Should be erased from the scene of time, right? Bayad Mahshavad, yeah? Always in the passive. In Hungarian, I am in trouble. I can never even translate it. We don't have a passive voice, so it's a problem. But English and Farsi does have. Yeah. But it is not only the Iranian rhetoric that time and again is more threatening or less threatening. Sometimes you hear much less. Sometimes you hear much more. Ahmadi was the fiercest of them all. And in a way, I think he did a very good service to everyone because he pointed out some problems. But we shouldn't forget that before 2012, before the nuclear negotiations came into a serious phase, Israel and the United States were sending messages every month or 2 months, leaking war plans, how Iran should be attacked, either by Israel or by the US or by both of them united. The threats are going 2 ways, depending on the exact timing, the exact situation. But this is only the rhetoric, the narratives. Then, of course, there is the Islamic Republic's commitment ever since the Islamic Revolution to support every poor and needy, not just the Muslims, but every poor and needy mustazafin. They have to support them, and they feel it. And in this, I think Iran looks at itself, perceives itself, whether it's right or wrong, as the defender of the poor and those who are helpless. And sometimes they come to the Palestinians. Sometimes this relationship is stopped. Obviously, Israel doesn't like it. But also, Iran doesn't like it that Israel is pinpointing, and now Israel is getting support from regional states. And then very strange situations, and my last sentence, are coming into being. The fierce Ahmadinejad, whom everyone was saying, oh, he's crying and making a havoc. He was well received in Saudi Arabia. He was walking with the Saudi king arm in arm, and he was calling him Ya Ammi, my uncle. And now Hassan Rouhani, by the way, everyone was happy that the only religious candidate among the Iranian presidential candidates won the race. Everyone was happy, and Hassan Rouhani is rejected. Because the things are happening not just in Iran, not just in the United States. And just one thing that has to be stated, that outside Israel in the Middle East, the biggest Jewish community, not very big, some 25 to 40,000 people, live in Iran. And they live in peace. I mean, if you walk along in Shiraz, the taxi driver would tell you, you look at these shops in the biggest center. The owners are Jews, all of them. And did you know that under the Iranian constitution, the Jewish community sends a member of parliament, because we were talking about this over lunch, the Armenians, the northern Armenian Catholics and the southern Armenians and the Jewish community, they do have some rights. And you can visit the grave of Esther and Mordechai in Hamadan, and there is no soldier around. You just enter like a museum. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this very elaborate answer. We will collect maybe 2 questions. There was a question in front still.
Kind of comment?
Sure, but please be brief. And then there is one at the back, the hand at the back, and one here. That's it.
Thank you very much for all of you. It's a great pleasure to be here. Of course, first of all, I have to thank Professor SWOBODA from International Institute for Peace for providing this opportunity for this pleasant evening for presentation of a book regarding Iran. Of course, this institute also provided this presentation, this opportunity to have this seminar about Iran and international system around 1.5 years ago, yeah? Of course, it's very good. We had very nice and very good lectures today and presentation, but three or four of the people who I had the privilege to participate in the seminar in 2018 in June. Unfortunately, tonight, we don't have the presence of Professor Milani, Professor Sharon Hunter, Professor Hokard, I think from French, yeah? And Professor Sajjadpour. They all also presented excellent articles and insight that could help and will help to have a kind of understanding about the position of Iran in international system. And of course, the whole presentation tonight was very excellent. And I was just going to give a small comment on this. It's kind of completion of what Professor Fragner informed here about the kind of element of continuation. The main, of course, the main goal of this book is to help the international society, the academic society to understand the situation of Iran, the policy in Iran, and what's happening there. If you're going to understand it, it's one of the most important items is this, to look to this item of continuity that during all histories has been available and has affected Iranian policy, not only during history and right now it has. Professor Fragner very good, excellently mentioned the civil society in Iran and the will for freedom that there has been during the Shah and still there is. But there are another elements at the regional level and also domestic level in Iran that is affecting the Iranian foreign policy and the situation what's happening there in the region. One is, for example, the strategic and the geographical situation of the Iran that I think it was Professor Milani described as a kind of strategic loneliness of Iran that in terms of, for example, religion, in terms of language, in terms of ethnicity, and many other factors, is Iran in that region in the Middle East is alone. Iran is a Shiite country. All countries around Iran are some kind of Sunni Muslims. Iran is speaking Persian, or other countries there are speaking either Arabic or Turks or the Turkish. Historically also, there has been this kind of strategic aloneness with Iran. These factors had its own impacts in the Iranian history before the revolution and after the revolution, and still is impacting the Iranian foreign policy. It's very important. Another factor that's very important is kind of distrust to maybe foreign power that has and still is getting more extensive. It's exactly what's happening during the last month. For example, in the relation with Iran and the United States, with the position that the European countries are taking this position. This distrust was, for example, you can see that during the last...
Thank you. Could you please come up to the conclusion?
Yeah, this is just exactly, for example, twice during the First and Second World War, however, Iran was declared to be neutral, but was invaded. During the 8 years of the war between Iran and Iraq, many of these European countries and world powers, they supported other countries against Iran. And even right now, when Iran however, have been ready to come to the negotiation, to come to kind of compromise with the West, with other countries about this issue. That you can see, for example, about the JCPOA, about this nuclear deal. But United States, first of all, they withdrew, and after that, the European Unions, they committed to kind of compromise, but they committed to do some privilege for Iran, the minimum privilege, but they didn't do it. And still, no, they are not supporting. And this is strengthening this wall of distrust between Iran and the international society. Of course, it's very important. And the last one is kind of a sense of Iran, kind of not a sense of exceptionalist only, but only kind of a sense of being a regional power. By any factor of measuring a regional power, Iran is a regional power. In terms of, for example, society and the size of society, the size of its economy, the geographical size.
Thank you very much. I have to stop you here. Exactly. I'm very sorry.
Two more sentences. what will help? What will help is just to support this regional to support and to provide this opportunity that this.
Respect the lady. Sorry.
Sorry.
I think we can continue.
Yeah,
thank you.
No, thank you very much. We're just going to just providing this opportunity to have to respect this. It will help. It will be useful for the region, and it will be useful for all the international society. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry, sir, for taking that much of your time. So sorry. Thank you.
Thank you for this commentary. I think we can continue our discussion also during lunch, lunch reception. We still had 2 more questions. One question is at the back. The gentleman already has a microphone. Can I please? All right. Can we please have a very, very short question from you and very, very short 2 questions from you too? All right?
Es tut mir leid, ich rede auf Deutsch. Vielleicht wenn übersetzt wird kurz. Ich vermisse die wirtschaftliche Lage im Iran intern, weil eben Irans Wirtschaft ist stark militarisiert, erstens. Zweitens, auch wenn man die Landwirtschaft in Betracht nimmt, die Bevölkerungswachstum und der Zerstückelung der Landwirtschaft auf die Erben, dann man merkt, wie zerstört ist die iranische Wirtschaft. Dieser Faktor ist sehr wichtig und ein Land, ein Potenzial eines Landes, man misst an Wirtschaft im Inland, dann internationale Beziehungen, und dann Demokratie im Land und die Potenzial der Bevölkerung. Und wir sehen, diese Faktoren im Iran sind miserabel. Es gibt eine Grenze zwischen Iran und Irak. 300.000 Menschen sind davon abhängig, dass sie mit ihrem Rücken...
Vielen Dank. Darf ich hier Sie hier unterbrechen?
Ganz kurz,
sorry, we cannot continue.
Ich meine, ich vermisse diesen Teil, dass man von Ihnen innere Wirtschaft gar nicht sagt.
Thank you.
Und das ist ein wichtiger Faktor.
Heinz, you can maybe correct me if I understood everything right. So economic situation in Iran and militarized economy, destroyed economy, how it's a very important point that was missed during the presentations, right? 2 more questions.
Okay, so I'm not going to present myself itself, just come to the question. After 3 months in Iran, it was very evident to me that women feel very suppressed and there is a revolutionary feeling among the public. What the civil society seems to share is this kind of Persian identity and the love for the country, but actually very strong hatred towards the government. At the same time, there is resentment against external powers, such as the US, especially now in light of what happened with Soleimani. But also there is, now I kind of lost myself. But the essential question is basically hatred against the government, but at the same time hatred against the US and fear of external intervention, and suffering, deprivation of rights internally, and also poverty. Where does this internal and external sphere meet, and is there a realistic chance for another revolution?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My question touches on that also. In fact, at Stephansplatz, in the first week of the year, as far as I remember, there was a mural held for Mr. Hassan Soleimani, and a counter-revolution sort of sparked also by the Iranian National Solidarity Group. All you need to know about them is that they shouted, mullahs are fascist, and so on. Well, you need to know a lot more about them. They're very interesting. But as I was saying, as she was also pointing out, how possible is a revolution? Especially also because Mr. Professor Fragner mentioned the tradition of protest in Iran. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Very short answers, maybe in concluding remarks from speakers. We had 3 questions on the economic situation, 2 questions actually, on the economic situation, militarization of economy, and the possibility of the revolution and suppression of women in civil society. Heinz, you can start.
So answering a question and concluding remarks, right? Let me just say something about the protests. So many who participated in the morning of the assassination of General Soleimani also went later on to the universities and organized a protest as well. So that's not two groups. So that's one group. And the students of the university, the Polytechnical University of Tehran, who were organizing the protest afterwards. So they issued a statement saying, we neither want internal repression nor external repression. So that means these demonstrations and these protesters are not the protesters for Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, who threatened to obliterate Iran as well and threatened to destroy their cultural sites and threatened them with sanctions. These people know that they are not the help they are not getting the help from foreign countries. So internal and external. So they will not strive for a revolution supported by the external forces. Concluding remarks, because I was talking about a lot about war. So let me talk a little bit about peace. So I've in the book I mapped out several suggestions. But if the cause of the current conflict is a hegemonic competition in the region, which basically I think it is, there is one face-saving possibility for both sides to get out of the situation of confrontation. So we have a historical analogy when Vice President Nixon, 1972, went to China to talk to the revolutionary leader Mao Zedong. They issued before the summit a declaration, the Shanghai Declaration, and the Shanghai Declaration would say both sides would renounce hegemony in East Asia. So Nixon wanted to get out of Vietnam anyway somehow, and Mao didn't want to support all these insurgents in East Asia. So that opened up the possibility for a very successful summit. So somehow it was implemented. It was not entirely implemented. There was Mao withdrew some support of the insurgents, and Nixon provided this. The end of the started to provide the preparation for the end of the Vietnam War. So both sides, Iran and the US, could agree on such a declaration, very general. The both sides renounce hegemony in the Persian Gulf. So that was one possibility, and more concretely, because everybody is talking about the military and the missile thing, there have to be a regional dialogue about arms control, about confidence building measures. Then you can address all these concerns and qualms about the Iranian missiles. There are other missiles in the regions as well, with longer range. Saudi missiles have a much longer range than the Iranian missiles. So they should be addressed on a regional level, and not so much with the interference of the United States or other external powers for that matter, accompanied by confidence-building measures like we had here in the CSE process in the 70s. So that would be probably a way out of the current situation, and still to avoid military confrontation, which I do think is still very likely in the months to come, September, October.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. We are living in the era of changing world order. As we see, the US is imposing sanctions on Russia. It is imposing sanctions on Iran. It is making conflict with China or so-called trade wars. and it is making Russia close to China, and Iran can also join this alignment. And recently we can see that they are making even some military naval drills with each other. I do not want to be. I will not agree with the point of view that Iran is a lonely planet in the region. Iran has great influence in the region because they are Shia, and we can see that in Iraq there are many Shias, the most of population, Lebanon, and the ruling party of Syria. They are Alavis, but they have also close ties with Shias, and it is making Iran a strong regional power, which also have some language commonalities with Tajikistan and with Afghanistan also. So Iran is strong regional power, which can be also connected with Sino-Russian camp, and we will see what will happen. About the question of economy, yes, now the economy of Iran is not so good because of the US unilateral sanctions. But we had also a question about military. Yes, I am agree with that because of United Nations Security Council sanctions, Iran could not buy or sell military weapons. But recently it could develop weapons, and they have ballistic missiles, and they could even destroy a US drone. It is speaking about their capability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. ERZSÉBET, your concluding remarks?
I try to answer your question. I don't think that there is going to be another revolution in the foreseeable future. On the one hand, the Islamic Revolution was a revolution, a social transformation on the scale comparable to the French Revolution. So everything was turned upside down, and then it was a very, very deeply shaking event of the society. You are absolutely right that there is a lot of discontent among the public. Wherever you go, people would stop you in the street, especially because you are blonde, and they would see that you are a foreigner. They would tell you, those Ahund, we don't want them anymore. And but I don't think that there is an alternative. At the moment, definitely not. Or what I should rather say, that the alternative, as I expect, and maybe I am wrong, I am not a fortune teller, so I don't know, that the change will come from within. The change will come from within, and the change has started to come already several times, but then again, all the time, something happens in the international system, buying back. Now, if there has been someone who has given a huge slap in the face of changes in Iran, now this is President Trump. As you said, as long as you are attacked, you cannot, and the Iranian people love their country. What's more, I think there is a very interesting phenomenon that in Iran, the many minorities, almost half of the population belongs to different minorities, they are adding up to the Iranianness. They are not going separately. They are the ones, I don't think there is any other country, where they are contributing to the Iranianness first, and then maybe try to understand their difference. So I don't think, as long as there is such a horrible and unbearable, from their point of view, pressure from the outside, the Iranians will stand shoulder to shoulder. I don't think that there. However, and this Trump issue, and I don't want to criticize President Trump, far from it. But anyhow, we have to say that this has come at a very difficult moment. Those who have gone to Iran a lot of times in the past few decades, the public, how should I say, the topic of every small talk has been for the past at least 25 years how ill Ayatollah Khamenei is. He will die instantly. And he is still okay, he is well and sound and appears and gives speeches and so on. But obviously he is getting old, and increasingly there has been a political kind of, should I say, preparation for what is happening afterwards. And I was quite surprised that I have heard some talks even about the possibility that is included in the constitution, that for a temporary solution, a three-person council, should I say a triumvirate, can take over if the need be. There are also guesses who could be the next supreme leader. And it is shifting. Sometimes you hear figures who could be, I think, who could be welcomed by the West. I don't want to say names here. And then it shifts towards the more conservatives who would be unacceptable, who prove to be unacceptable even to the bigger half of the Iranian population. I don't say names again. So there is going to be a big change, but at the moment I can only see the change coming from the inside. But anytime the social support, and we shouldn't forget that the Iranian system, this model, sometimes gives way to public will. The legitimacy, as I said, the mass support. When the supreme leader realized that most of the public would like to have negotiations, he said, well, I don't trust the Americans, but okay, negotiate. And there have been moments like this. But obviously, under such a big pressure, this cannot be done. So I am very much afraid. I don't know where it is going. Thank you.
Thank you. Mahdi?
Well, actually, I adore your concerns. As you are European, now you have the right to vote for Greens, because Greens are the best right now, yeah, in my opinion, because they can change environment, etc., etc., etc. But, you know, we don't have that that kind of freedom of choice. So there are some people that are directly selected, and they are vetting people who to vote and who not to vote. In 2002, 2003, I'm following exactly your arguments. In 2002, 2003, when Mr. Bush announced Iran as part of the axis of evil, it was the reformist president who wanted to do some reforms in Iran. And exactly at the last years, in the last years of his election, the vetting system in Iran did not vet reformist candidates to go again in the parliament or even be candidate. So this mechanism is actually out of democratic norms that you have. So this mechanism is again going on. In a few weeks we will have election, and again the same story. We have 50, 60 members of the parliaments who are not vetted to go and be candidate in the next round, which will be in a few weeks. How could that happen? If they did something against law, they should be in prison. If they didn't, they should be eligible to go to be candidate. So we don't have that thing that you have. And about saying and wishing death, well, it's not what we want. We don't want to say wish death to anyone. We don't want to send it. There are many people who love other people in Iran. If you see in the past few weeks, you see that people do not want to walk on the flags of other countries. I was born in a school that there was a flag of the United States and we should have walked on it. We didn't do it even from that time because we respect other countries. So there are these people in Iran. The democratic movement in Iran is going on, yeah? So in a democratic phase that a country needs, we don't need to have an alternative. We are the alternative, yeah? Democratic society selects by its own, yeah? So that time is far, because there are still many people who believe that this system works. And unfortunately, this system is the system of them only. So there is no respect for those others who don't want to have this system. They don't get vetted, etc., etc. One thing that is really crucial at this time, well, actually, I think in these specific moments, in these conditions, you can change everything to your advantage, yeah? So Iran needs a constitutional reform at this moment. We don't need to wait for a few years afterwards. People are showing their discontent on the streets. it should be responded. They have their own demands. So I'm thinking that it's very likely that there is another mistake going on in the increasing tensions between US and Iran. So what will happen? Another mistake, again, people will come on the streets. What will you do? So you need to listen to their demands. If women do not want to be forced to wear hijab on the streets, so you should respect that, you should change it. Yeah? So this thing, we call it, it's our democratic movement, and we saw it in many countries in Latin America, and I hope we will have it one day.
Thank you very much. It was a very informative discussion tonight. We talked, unfortunately, also a lot about war, a lot about conflict, a lot about tensions and insecurities. But then at the end, we also spoke about human capital, we spoke about love for the country, we spoke about ethnicities and how they all contribute to the common identity of Iranians. At the International Institute for Peace, we want to conclude with peace. Therefore, I would like to ask MITRA SHAHMORADI to read a poem for us, and then we will also hear some music, and then we can also enjoy some Persian food in the hall.
Ich weiß jetzt nicht,
Vielleicht kann ich da stehen?
Ja, wo du willst. Oder darüber?
Da ist besser, weil dann bin ich neben ihm. Danke. Darf ich, bevor ich mein Gedicht lese, noch einmal mich bedanken für alle Autoren, die in unserem Buch mitgemacht haben, für natürlich Maria, die sehr, sehr viel für das Buch getan hat, und für das Institut, das bestens uns unterstützt immer, das beste Institut der Welt, und auch natürlich euch alle, die so lang hier geduldig sitzt und mitmacht. Eine Kleinigkeit will ich aber erwähnen, das ist sehr wichtig für mich. Ich habe im Buch geschrieben über, besonders mein Fokus war auf Thema Frauen und auch Migration. Ich bin von der Generation, die das Leben vor der Revolution, der Iran vor der Revolution kennt, die Bewegung und Wechsel erlebt hat und der Iran nach der Revolution eben kennt und verfolgt. Deshalb darf ich mit Sicherheit sagen, das ist eine iranische Revolution und nicht eine islamische Revolution. Dann ist das zu Islamischer Republik geworden, mit Referendum. Aber es ist sehr, sehr wichtig zu wissen, in der Zeit, als es im Iran diese Bewegung begonnen hat, die Generation nach der Revolution weiß das gar nicht vielleicht, waren alle Menschen von ganz unterschiedlichen Seiten. Und deshalb möchte ich immer selber sagen und bitte ich auch, dass man sagt, iranische Revolution. Ich habe über Migranten gesprochen und im Buch geschrieben, nun darf ich ein Gedicht lesen in dem Zusammenhang, darf ich aber vorher unsere wunderbare Musiker vorstellen, der Herr Pejman Parsmer, der spielt Santur, ein traditionelles Instrument. Er begleitet mich ab und zu bei meinen Lesungen und Ausstellungen, und jetzt heute eben hat er uns die Ehre gegeben, dabei zu sein, und nachdem wir fertig sind, wird er auch noch weiterhin ein bisschen für uns spielen. Danke, ich lese jetzt. Warum bist du so fern? Warum hast du mich nicht gehalten? Aber deine Pracht und Schönheiten sehe ich. Aber deine mächtigen Berge sehe ich. Aber deine duftenden Blumen rieche ich. Aber deine alten Bäume sehe ich. Aber deinen strahlenden Himmel sehe ich. Aber deine warme Sonne spüre ich. Aber deine fruchtbare Erde sehe ich. Aber deine mir vertrauten Menschen sehe ich. Warum wolltest du mich nicht? Warum hast du mich nicht behalten, mein Land? چرا مرا نخواستی؟ چرا این چنین دوری؟ چرا مرا از رفتن باز نداشتی؟ ولی من شکوه و زیبایی تو را میبینم. ولی من کوههای پرتوانت را میبینم. ولی من گلهای عطرآگینت را میبویم. ولی من درختان کهنسالت را میبینم. ولی من آسمان درخشانت را میبینم. ولی من خاک بارآورت را میبینم. ولی من مردمان مأنوس با منت را میبینم. چرا مرا نخواستی؟ چرا مرا نگاه نداشتی؟ سرزمین من.
Enjoy the music, enjoy the reception in the hall.